You ready for your introduction, Mei Lin?
Sure, I'm
Okay.
ready to go.
All right, very good. So everyone, we're delighted to have you with us for our first full PCI meeting of the year. Delighted to have Mei Lin Fung with us. She is the chair and co-founder of PCI along with Vince Cerf, or PCI as we call it today, short for People-Centered Internet. As PCI community members, you know that Mei Lin works tirelessly to ensure people are center stage as digital interdependence shapes societies and economies. Key focus of her work is promoting resilient communities financed with digital assets and using data so communities connect and members can thrive. She brings systematic evidence-based analysis to complex information supply chain and demand challenges. She's brought that expertise to federal health futures at the Department of Defense. She's been at Intel. She's done operations research at Royal Dutch Shell and has extensive experience in customer relationship management approaches. So through PCI, she's built alliances based on people-centered ecosystems with the IEEE, the World Economic Forum, World Bank, UN, and others at the country and regional level. So today, Mei Lin is going to share and recap what happened in 2021 for the organization and take a sneak peek at what's going to be happening in 2022. With that, Mei Lin, we're delighted to have you with us.
I'm really happy to be here. And I've also shared a link to the text document that I'll be speaking from. This allows you to not just follow along, but, but also to comment, if you like, on the document or speak up in this forum. So I am really hoping that this can be an interactive session. I'm going to share my screen now. And I was neglecting to say thank you so much, Kevin, for your leadership in the PCI community calls.
Thank you.
Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
I hope you cannot see my horrible screen, the rest of my screen, which is really messy. Okay, I have taken the opportunity to actually give both the year-end update, but also give some insights into what we'll be doing in 2022. That said, our board retreat on 2022 has not yet taken place. And so this is actually a chance for the community to provide input and let the board know what will be interesting for you. You know, put in your plus ones or your minus ones, or say, why aren't you doing this? Just go ahead and put it into the document. For those of you who haven't seen it, inside the chat is the link to this document. And I'll ask Kevin to share the chat link with others who might come in later. So nice to see all of you, Elephant, Anonymous Camel, and so on. It's very good to have you. This is really a momentous time. COVID has accelerated digital like no one could ever have expected.
Ik wou fruit voor je kopen en toen ben ik het toch weer vergeten.
Kevin, can you mute the mute all?
Yeah.
Thank you.
There you go.
Great. But if anybody wants to make a comment, please raise your hand and Kevin will let you come in. So,
Or you can just put questions in chat too.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, I will say that for my whole life, I've been preparing for this moment. So when I was 14 years old, I was standing in the Singapore National Library, and I had just done what is usually what happens when you're 14, which is read Brave New World in 1984. And I suddenly realized that technology was going to change everything in my lifetime, and that we would come to a crossroads where technology could be used to control people, a la 1984, or could potentially allow us to have a different kind of society and way of interacting with each other. And so at the age of 14, I made a commitment to myself that I would stay at the breaking wave of technology. All my life, I would do that. And, you know, when you do something for 50 years, eventually it all compound interest really helps. And so I'd like to say and encourage young people to find meaning and purpose early in your life, because paying attention in particular topics allows you, just like money gains interest over 50 years, knowledge gains compound interest. And I think we can benefit from that, and I certainly have. So I'm somebody who sits with one leg in the past and one leg in the future. I'm not that good at the present, and people who have looked at my operational issues know that. So the past is really his history, really the American Revolution, the Age of Enlightenment, the past histories of India, of China, of Indonesia. All of these really inform, I think, what we need to be thinking about as we go ahead. It is all too easy to take what's happening around us and just project. Douglas Engelbart, I worked with him closely for 4 years as the chair of his core planning committee. He is the winner of the Technology Medal of Honor, Turing Award winner, inventor of the computer mouse, the father of human-computer interface. Doug Engelbart said that the digital frontier tricks us by making us think that we know it all, and it's just like the next step. He said, no, it's vast. It's vast beyond our comprehension. And David Bray, who was an executive director of PCI, brought this wonderful analogy, which is, I think you all know that the internet addresses IPv4 and IPv6. So IPv4 was the earlier set of internet addresses. And if you put all of those addresses into something the size of a beach ball, how big do you think the addresses for IPv6 are? Meaning beach ball expands to what? So I'll put you out of your misery, the volume of the sun. So how can we expect that our intuition developed in something the size of a beach ball can take us all the way to understanding the scaffolding, the legal system, the operating system of something that is vast as the sun? And IPv6 is going to run out of addresses soon, and we're going to get to something that's even bigger than that. So here's where we are at the very beginning of the digital frontier. And what Vint Cerf and I wanted to do with founding the People-Centered Internet, to say, it isn't about the technology, it's about what we want to do with it. And when I say we, I really mean we. It is not single individuals. And what Douglas Engelbart used to say is, it's all about community. If we don't gather in community, we will lose something precious. And we are losing that something precious now, as we have gone almost to the limit of what can be done when individuals drive their personal agendas using the internet. We are entering an era of digital public goods. So how has PCI been responding to this? The COVID catalyst has allowed us to concentrate on what is the social scaffolding, so that networks of digital communities can share and learn with each other, and celebrate our humanity and be joyful. I had an exchange with Doreen Bogdan, the ITU development director, yesterday. And I said, you know, the original internet was fueled by friendship. And she had a big emoji smiley face back. Because those of us who have been there and seen that know that that friendship was what made the internet possible. It was not the World Bank, it was not the UN, it was not the United States, even though it started it, for it to spread around the world. Individuals in each country had to decide, this is good for my family, for my community, for my country. So that scaffolding continues. So Steve Crocker, one of the fathers of the internet, the man who invented RFC, request for comments, is doing a project within the people-centered internet to help us think about the domain name system in a way that will allow us to spread to the size of the sun. Because as he said to me, Steve said, well, we came up with a DNS system when there were 40 people on the internet. And it's a miracle that it's lasted this long. But now we need to have much clearer ways for access and control. And we're glad that Heather Flanagan actually joined Steve in that project under the People-Centered Internet. And she was the RFC editor for the Internet Engineering Task Force. So we have extremely deeply versed people within our community. We also welcome many new faces. Our board member, Justin Bryant, who joined us when he was 25, and I think he's 26 now. He has brought in some first summer interns and will be taking lead with the IGF Youth, the youth arm of the Internet Governance Forum. Lynn Wells, who all of you know and love, mentored the Hasselplattner Institute students at the Global Design Thinking workshop that we did, where we looked at the situation of Puerto Rico. So design thinking is all about, how does it affect people? What's the user experience? How can users and people be involved in co-creating? And we did this project with Echapalante in Puerto Rico, and they were so inspired by it. The plan is to actually have students from the 7 universities in Puerto Rico actually run co-creation, co-design, design thinking workshops in their communities in Puerto Rico. And again, thanks to Lynn Wells, we have deepened our academic collaborations. We are much, much more closely tied with George Mason, CRAS, and Star Tides. And thank you, Lynn, for bringing really very complementary pieces. In a way, people-centered internet is doing advocacy for connecting in a people-centered, planet stewarding way. George Mason has the network of people who are able to do those kinds of projects. We're also working with the Frugal Innovation Hub at Santa Clara University here in Silicon Valley. Okay, Bonita Banducci has just joined and she needs to hear me say this. I love Santa Clara University. Santa Clara University has the Macula Applied Ethics Center. I see us doing more and more with Santa Clara University over the future years. And in 2022, we will deepen our ties with the Hasselplattner Institute, which actually heads up the Global Design Thinking Alliance in 17 countries. And we will also be expanding our academic network to Singapore. I'll just take a pause there in case anyone has any questions about the first 3 items. We have about 9, so would anybody like to ask a question or make a comment? If not, put your question or comment in the chat and I will keep going. So we're on to item 4, the professional associations. I speak here mostly about the IEEE, but I actually do see all professional organizations, for example, the Project Management Institute, the Institute of Management Accountants, the CPAs, many other professional associations are actually seeing what's happening in the world and they're wondering what they can do about it. I believe that PCI can provide a place where networks of networks can connect. Certainly, we're doing that with gusto, working with the IEEE, which is, in fact, the world's largest professional association with over 400,000 members in 160 countries. The way they work is to actually begin when people are young. So there's student chapters in every computer science and electrical and electronic engineering school in the world. And then we have the professors and the researchers are part of this. So are people in industry. And for up and coming engineers, the IEEE is the on-ramp into their profession. So we, PCI, lead the Social Impact Measurement Pre-Standards Working Group because we've identified within engineering the difficulty of doing people-centered work is how do you know you're doing it? How do you know it's actually working for the people? How do you know it's working for the community? So we'll be deepening our work in there, actually expanding to ESG, environmental, social, and governance impact measures. And we'll have some exciting announcements about our ESG work in later on this year. The Humanitarian Activities Committee is a major committee that was set up by the IEEE board. We've been, through my engagement, a member of the executive committee for the last couple of years. And this year, I chaired the assessment committee, and we've made a report on recommendations about how to measure IEEE's humanitarian impact. And that will help us actually have influence because we're actually working out how IEEE itself measures itself in supporting humanity, advancing humanity with technology, which is the IEEE tagline. There's also been a major initiative within the IEEE on sustainability, and it's gathering steam, and there will be announcements later this year. In the meantime, some of you may have seen my call for volunteers for the technical committee for the Society for the Social Impact of Technology. So IEEE publishes a magazine called Technology and Society, and we've been invited, PCI, to form a technical committee for that, which will give sort of academic credibility to the things that we're talking about and bring in actually academic researchers into this field. So those of you who are interested, please reach out to me. We'll have the first meeting of the Sustainability Technical Committee certainly in the first quarter, hopefully in January, but if not, in the first week of February. The next piece is government engagement. So GovStack is a UN initiative for establishing digital building blocks. This is critical for the next wave of the internet. In a way, this is what we've wanted to be involved in. So if you think about TCP/IP as the messaging protocol that enabled the internet, we are now moving to higher levels in the OSI stack. And GovStack is really talking about what are the components, the digital building blocks for digital government services. In almost every country, the protocols that are standardized by the government become the national protocols. Excuse me. So the fact that we are on the advisory board means that we will be able to influence these building blocks to make sure that they work for people. These building blocks address things like messaging, identity, payments, and many more, hundreds, but we're starting with these. We have, in fact, just are in process of bringing on a GovStack PCI fellow, but it hasn't yet been approved by the board, so I haven't announced it. However, we will be engaging deeply technically with the GovStack initiative. And those of you who are interested, please let me know, because these are the next level protocols for the internet. We're also delighted to be engaging with the G7 and the G20. These are the big economic gatherings of the top 7 countries and the top 20 countries. This year, G7 is under Germany's presidency, and the G20 is under Indonesia's presidency. And I have been able to help do a bridge that both sides wanted on the topic of clean IT. So for those of you who have clicked to see this thing, you can click on clean IT, and that is the paper published out of last year's, the 2021 G20 chaired by Italy. They selected the paper which PCI and the Hasso-Plattner Institute submitted on energy efficient IT, clean IT. Our policy recommendations were for government procurement to require the clean IT label. This means that first starting with energy efficiency, but down the road, PCI can talk about, is it people-centered? Have we designed it so that our children are safe? Have we designed it so that families can look after their elders in a helpful way? All of these expansions of the clean IT service mark are what we can be working on in future years. Sorry. We also had the former Minister of ICT for Colombia join the PCI board. Diego Molano Vega is known for Viva Digital, which was the most famous Latin American program for digitization. And he is basically the Latin American digital thought leader. And we're very pleased to have him. He will be leading our cities initiative in 2022. And he'll be working with the UN development program, City to City Network. I see that I have repeated this. Sorry. I must have thought that it was very important. So we've also had our digital cooperation and diplomacy monthly series. This was started and co-founded with Doreen Bogdan from the ITU Development Director. She is the United States candidate for Secretary General of the ITU. She co-founded our Digital Cooperation and Diplomacy informal network with Vint Cerf and Hinrich Tholkin, Germany's Digital and Climate Envoy, after we met in Berlin in 2019. The Technology Envoy Office had basically shared with us that the standard institutional structure of the UN might not be as agile or adaptive as would be needed for digital cooperation, and asked for our help. So we said, well, the internet was fueled by friendship. Let's create an informal network so that we can continue this work. And Vint Cerf had a particularly cogent insight, which came from his own work with the internet. He said, you're not trying to get MOUs between all these institutions. You're looking for the people who can see the future in each of those institutions, and you're bringing them together in the informal network. So they realize that they're not alone, and they can see other people who can see the future as they can see it. And it's by us working together that we'll pull this off. And so that's what the Digital Cooperation and Diplomacy monthly series is about. It is by invitation only, and we are very, very careful about how we curate this network. So that continues every month with about 10 months in the year. We have the Digital Cooperation Diplomacy Network, and we've had presentations from basically the representatives from Estonia, Germany, India, Malta, and Singapore. All their government technology groups have been talking there and will continue. We hope to invite people from African countries to be part of this. They are participating, but they haven't presented yet. Actually, they have. Brian Mwenga from Kenya, who was the government architect for the government enterprise. He has presented. We initiated the PCI fellowships, and we will have announcements for more in the future. But we're very proud of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fellows that we have now. And for those of you who are on, I think Todd Hoskins is on. Tiffany Bra is listening here, and I don't know if anybody else is, but we are so proud of you and the work and the thought leadership that you are providing within your domain and your geography. I wanted to have a shout out to Tiffany, who is leading India. She has been recognized by the President of India for her work on online access for blind people. And she will be having regular articles within our PCI newsletter and website on online access for the blind. I hope you can spread the word about her articles. So finally, we identified last year our 2 pillars, the building resilient communities and digital finance. And I wanted to give an update on the 2 pillars, to give the historical, which is we are inspired by Douglas Engelbart's networked improvement communities, and also builds on our years-long involvement with Puerto Rico. And because PCI actually wrote the digital recovery plan for Puerto Rico. And as we work with Puerto Rico, in fact, there's a chance to engage with government infrastructure building within Puerto Rico for government public goods, digital public goods that support resilient communities. And we see that as something that we can demonstrate in Puerto Rico. We're delighted to be working with Microsoft Learning, who is already working with Echapalante, and we're beginning to work with the Office of the Chief Medical Officer of Microsoft to see how we could do more in Puerto Rico to look at vaccine equity. We are very, very proud of the Tribal Resource Center, which Lynn Wells led the effort to get a grant from the Internet Society. And that is now well established. Todd Hoskins is working closely with Lynn as we are expanding the Tribal Resource Center at this particular time, which is the US federal government is making a lot of money available for broadband for tribal communities. And our commitment is that they own and operate what their broadband networks, and that so we want to provide the opportunities for tribal communities to steer their own boat as on the digital frontier. I have to recognize Matt Rantanen, who has been with us from the beginning, for his leadership on Native American communities. There's no one in North America who is more recognized and received more awards for technology for Native communities than Matt Rantanen. And we will have new tribal initiatives to announce in 2022. The final one is one that's close to my heart, financing for micro and small medium enterprises. Back in 2020, I was invited by the World Bank and IFC, the International Finance Corp, to speak at the Global SME Financing Forum to give the closing keynote. What was the digital transformation that I saw for SME financing in the 10 years ahead? And what I said was that we have the ingredients, we just need to learn to cook. Because in fact, in China, tens of millions of SMEs are already receiving financing based on their digital footprints. But how could we make this available in the rest of the world in a different way? So we've been proposing and have been working with Indonesia, in conversation with Kenya, Bangladesh, and Colombia to look at something we're calling a digital utility. And you'll hear much more on this. The idea is that, in fact, we have to move away from the beach ball situation that who collects the data owns the data to we own the data from our digital footprints. And you'll see that enshrined in our PCI founding principles, that we have rights to the data that we create. So the digital utility is actually a formal expression of how we can collectively own data and allow it to be used for research and analysis for the public good, for our good, and in particular for SMEs to reduce the risk of credit risk financing and therefore allow for lower interest rates. That's it. I'm giving you the roundup. The number 8 is a special number in the Chinese culture. It's a lucky number. So I will end here and open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Mei Lin. Well done. And thank you for all of the updates. We'll start with Schneider. Alfonso had a question about youth participation. Alfonso, if you would elaborate on your question for Mei Lin.
Sure. Thank you, Mei Lin, for all the information. And hello, everybody. So this is Schneider. I'm from Colombia. And my question is more, let's say, focused on understanding the vision, since I am just, let's say, like diving in or understanding all the PCI work and your vision also for the future, and how not just my generation, but younger generations as well can get engaged and involved and participate. So that's why I asked about your vision, mainly about the next 5 years for PCI. And I want you, if you can for sure, or if it's clear right now, talk about specific roles or events or the engagement in general for next generation.
Yeah. You'll find that my answers are always in the past and then into the future. So in the past, how the internet spread was through the development of networked information centers. Each university would set up a network information center and connect to the next. This has become the national research and education networks of many countries. The graduate students who set up those network information centers for the internet became the technology leaders and policymakers in their country. Let me give you one example. Ndemo Bitange in Kenya was a graduate student at the University of Nairobi. He set up the Network Information Center. He eventually became the permanent secretary of the Ministry of ICT for Kenya, because he was so early. He could see the future. He helped bring his country there. He is the godfather of M-Pesa. M-Pesa is the mobile money breakthrough. People say, how did mobile money begin in M-Pesa? It began in M-Pesa in Kenya. M-Pesa began in Kenya because Ndemo Bitange, when he was in his early 20s, set up the internet connection for Kenya to the rest of the world. We are in that moment now for the next wave of the internet. So I want the young people to step up to do the network, the community, resilient community hubs that will connect communities to each other. That's the chance to move forward now. And I want to do this through the Internet Governance Forum, through the IEEE student chapters, and any other youth groups that want to be involved with this. Resilient communities is the way to go, to have an internet of the people, by the people, for the people, and with the people. And those young people who are inspired to do that need to work with the people-centered internet to set up your resilient community hubs in your community. We are still pioneering that right now in Puerto Rico. We're at the very beginning of this. I've learned that if you start something when it's small, the wave as it grows takes you up. You don't have to swim up. You just sit and the wave takes you up. This has happened over and over again for me in all my life. I am so sure that this is going to happen. So join us, Alfonso.
All right, very good. Next, Brian Donahue had a question related to PCI and healthcare. Brian.
Well, let me start with the story of Mei Lin and I 8 years ago, when Mei Lin passionately said that healthcare in this country was going to collapse and we need to help communities and individuals take health into their own hands. And for 8 years, we have been building that torch. So Mei Lin, my question was, can you talk about what do you see about PCI and healthcare? I don't think you mentioned it already this morning. How do you see healthcare? And like the social determinants of health, really driven by cloud technology and big data analytics and artificial intelligence to do exactly what we talked about and have been working on for 8 years. How do you see it today, Mei Lin?
So I actually see it the same way as we saw it back then in that little deli off Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley. Resilient communities is the way to go. And resilience means not just health, but resilience in finding an income. That's COVID has devastated many families because their sources of income have just gone. How can we be more resilient in putting food on the table, in having shelter? All of these represent our humanity. Somehow, we've got distracted into thinking that the purpose of doing stuff is about money, but it's not about money. It's about our well-being, our family, making a better place for the next generation. We have to bring this back forward. The people-centered internet is of the people, by the people, and for the people. But how did we today, where we are, spend now all our time talking about things that have nothing to do with that? Let's come back to what the core meaning of life is. And it does start with health. Without health, you can't do anything. So if you don't look after yourself, you're not going to be able to look after anybody else, much less your children or their children. So social determinants of health. This is something that people who are working in public health know about, that in fact, 85% of health outcomes are driven by what happens around you, your social environment. Only 15% is driven by clinical interactions, drugs you take, things you do. But the National Institute of Health in the United States spends $40 billion of research on the 15% clinical interventions,
Right.
and not the 85% social determinants of health. We're trying to solve a big problem, but confining all our work to one tiny part of it. Once we begin to look at the whole community, what we can do together, we can do much more. And it's not about socialism or altruism or anything. Humanity, our civilization has only been able to make progress because we've worked with each other, because we've come together. And so digital technology is the greatest instrument for us to come together in many, many ways. And so social determinants of health can be measured. We can look at progress. We can actually see what's going on in our neighborhoods. We just haven't decided to measure those things in such a way that we could guide the boat.
I just think we need a sort of subcommittee under IEEE or subcommittee under PCI for healthcare, because it's such a large chunk of being a human. So think about that.
Point taken. Will do, Brian.
Very good. Brian, thanks for bringing that to focus for our conversation today. Next, Tiffany Brar has some thoughts about global digital services and tribal response centers. Tiffany? Are you there? You'd come off mute.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Tiffany.
You put some questions into chat or some comments, so we welcome them. Tiffany?
Do you want to say them out loud, Tiffany? Kevin, maybe you
Well,
can.
I'm going to go into chat then, and
Government collaborations for the internet protocols and digital services like messaging and things. So my comment was to make them digitally inclusive and accessible, because PCI is a people-centered internet. So people with disabilities, not only blindness, but the other 21 disabilities which are listed, or even more, people with autism, people with locomotor disabilities, visual impairment, everyone should have accessibility, because in our government, of course, in the Indian government apps, a lot of the apps and a lot of the websites are just not accessible. We cannot access the information, even relating to the COVID protocols, even relating to healthcare also, and other government services. So that was my comment, to try. Of course, the US has the ADA, the Act of Disabilities Act, Accessibility Disability Act, and the European Union also has its own act, but there are a lot of Asian countries which still do not have such kind of laws. So I hope people-centered internet and all of us together will be able to do that. Yeah, that was my comment. And about the tribal resource centers, yes, we do have a lot of tribal areas here in India. And I'm really happy to know that PCI has taken the initiative to create tribal resource centers for broadband and internet services for people in tribal areas, because this is a very big challenge during the pandemic, especially when all educational services, schools, colleges, classes, information, health, everything has been online. Yeah.
Thank you, Tiffany. Well
Thank you.
said.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have Ben Kaczynski, Bob Spoor, and Lan Jensen in queue. All right, so I will just acknowledge that. Let's start with Ben. He had a question about GovStat.
Yeah, first of all, I am very pleased that you mentioned about M-Pesa, because as we reflect on the model of those startups that are extra institutional, that start lower, one of the things that I was most impressed about is that it didn't try to raise the technology stack of the participating community. It started by aligning with the norm in the community that was the broadest embracing of payment opportunities in Kenya. And I think it's a great example and exemplar for seeding the kinds of initiatives we're talking about. Second comment related to Brian's is I hope that when we do things on health, it is health, not just healthcare, that we're not looking at facilitating the institutional structures where they're focusing on health in its broadest terminology. My question was, it was pressing that you mentioned GovStack twice, because as one like you who addresses both the past and the future and is often anxious about the present, I get concerned that we're not creating an operating infrastructure or facilitating means of constraint and control. And what are we doing to make sure we don't, in GovStack, that we're not introducing instruments of control by sovereign states or entities that might offer constraint for innovation and creativity?
I'll answer that last one. What we are standing for within PCI as GovStack moves forward is that the building blocks need to be tested in community living learning labs, that each country should be actually, I mean, with physics, you have a physics lab, right? You don't do it all in your head theoretically. You actually go into the lab and you put your hypothesis through and you test it. That's what should be happening with building blocks. They should be put into community living learning labs. And did the digital government services work as expected? Do they have unforeseen consequences? Are there second or third order effects that we never anticipated? All of that stuff is not happening with digital technology today. We don't have any labs. It's just like, go for it. Baby monitors, $5, take out all the safeguards. Let everybody be attacked via their baby monitors. How dreadful is that? So community living learning labs is what we are stepping forward and saying, countries who want to do this in a way that doesn't bring bad consequences should be creating living learning labs in which digital technology can be tested. And there are natural places for this that actually spread, that are totally in line with how the internet originally spread. I already told the story about the National Research and Education Networks. They're how the internet spread. We should go back to the National Research and Education Networks and have them set up community living learning labs in the communities around those universities, eventually to the schools that are the feeder schools to those universities. So then we have ways of testing it. The way, what your question implied, somehow top down would be the way to do it. I think our best protection is bottom up.
I want to protect against top-down incursion and hijacking. And as you and I know from the beginning, some of that grew from an appropriate naivete, and few of us saw the perverse incentive that grew from advertising that corrupted a lot of patterns of commercial exercise. And how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? Not from a commercial standpoint. I'm probably more concerned from the sovereign state standpoint. That's all.
Yeah. No, it's a real danger. And that really shows the problem that we have today when we're thinking, is it state and individual? What Engelbart said is the only way to move into the digital frontier was through networks of communities, sharing and learning with each other. Mm-hmm. And he somehow knew that. And I gave a speech at his memorial, which I think is still available. And I said, you know, the Phoenicians invented writing. The Phoenicians invented writing, but it so threatened this established order that writing was lost in the Western world for 800 years. We run that risk right now with the internet. How can we take this, you know, this fire, this new fire that somehow the fathers and mothers of the internet have given us today, and make sure that we don't lose it for hundreds of years, because it is so threatening to the established order. You are seeing it all around you in every country.
Mhm. So next person that had a question, I see you got your mic on and ready, Bob Sporer.
Yeah, hi everybody. Great to be here. Bob Sporer from Ashoka. I actually didn't have a question that I put a note in the chat, but what Steve Crocker reminded me of was the interop conferences.
Yes.
You know, the three of which then, you know, were about interoperability, Dan Lynch and others, that, you know, that actually had a pretty instrumental role too in the development of the internet, even though it was a kind of a trade show. But wondering if it's time for something like that for PCI, you know, to sort of be more public in its work for, you know, fostering resilient communities, fostering some of the goals, both PCI and digital diplomacy and, you know, cooperation initiative and so on. You know, what do you think?
I think it's very timely that you say that. In fact, just last week in the GovStack meeting, I brought up interop. So for those of you who don't know what interop is, right at the beginning of the internet, there were many competing messaging standards. TCP/IP was one, IBM had one, different people had one, proprietary standards. TCP/IP was the open standard. And Dan Lynch, who had been operations manager at SRI, went to the DoD and said, we should have an interop. What's an interop? That's where the issue is software vendors need to make sure that TCP/IP worked on all hardware. Hardware vendors need to make sure that all software worked on hardware. So interop was, okay, this is the Irishman's solution to this problem. Everybody come to San Jose and drink beer for a week and test together. So that was interop started as the Irish solution to the testing problem. And I actually brought that up for GovStack, that we need to have interop and we need to focus on what works, not on theory.
Well, why?
Well, I'll volunteer to help.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, the Irishman, yeah.
Yeah.
You bet.
My mother's name was McCarthy.
And I'll moderate anywhere. So next, Lan Jensen.
Thank you.
Glad to have you with us, Lan.
Thank you so much. And always inspired hearing Mei Lin speak and amazed at the international reach of this group of leaders. And my point is echoing what Mei Lin, you said, and everyone's message here, that making practical impact that people can feel, be it health. And then my focus is on economic growth, because if people can't support themselves financially, not much else can happen. And also it is one thing that people are naturally motivated, let's say, for lack of better words. And so my question is about currently in the United States, probably other governments also have similar initiatives, but in the United States right now, ARPA funds are already out. And so my question is whether this group has any plan about utilizing the ARPA funds or anything. And two, I'm leading a group of people with proposals for local governments to help the digital transformation of their small businesses. And so if anyone in this forum is interested, my question is whether anyone is interested, and we can discuss a bit more afterwards. So back to the first question about visioning and planning to utilize the ARPA funds in the United States.
Great. Lan, I am honored to be on Lan Jensen's cybertrustamerica.org group. Lan began her life began this because she had stopped working at Charles Schwab as a cybersecurity analyst and became a mom. And then she looked at how the data was protected for her children at the doctors, and she realized there's no protection. And she began a civic group to help schools, libraries, doctors' offices, and so on to protect themselves. And so cybersecurity at the local level is what Lan is doing. Lan, we are starting something with the Arizona State University Applied Futures Lab on future casting, on what do we need. So I think that PCI and the Cyber Trust America should be working with local governments to actually facilitate threat casting and future casting scenario workshops in order to work out what do they want to do locally. And then we can go for funding with them when they have worked out for themselves what is it that would work best for them. So I definitely want to follow up. Perhaps you can write me something and we might be able to follow up with Cindy Kuhn of the Applied Futures Lab. And Todd Hoskins, who's here, works closely with Cindy. So let's both make sure that Lan is connected. Okay.
That's fantastic. So it's interesting. This is exactly 1 hour into our meeting. This is where our formal program normally ends, and we go into overtime for questions for those of you who want to stay. I don't have any other questions right now, but we are going to stay for a moment longer. And I want to just take a moment to thank my colleagues on the Guests and Speakers Committee for PCI, Lynn Wells, who was mentioned during the program, and Chris Page, who's actually out on his wedding anniversary on an exotic island. I'm not going to tell you where, but if he wants to share it when he gets back, he'll tell you all about it. But Lynn and Chris are great colleagues, and so I'm delighted that to be working with them last year, and we'll be working with them during the year ahead. So other questions for Mei Lin while we have her with us?
I think Mark Prensky has one.
Hi, Mark.
You're
on mute, my friend.
I'm off mute. I'm off. Thank you. Not always easy. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, Mei Lin. You're doing terrific work, and I love being part of your groups. The thing that's always bothered me about the people-centered internet, the single thing, is that word people-centered. And so our universe is a lot bigger than people. And for example, I could see with the technology coming that we have today that every single living thing on the planet has a tag and is somehow part of this thing. And maybe we need to represent them. I don't know. Have you thought about expanding this beyond people? I know originally it was people against machines, and I see that as becoming symbiotic. So, but the question is, can we make it bigger than just people?
Of course, and we should. And I've taken to saying people-centered planet stewarding when I write, because how can people continue if we don't have a planet? Well, we have a spaceship Earth. I had a actually very good call with Daniel Glusenkamp, who is the head of the California Institute of Biodiversity. And we really found a lot of common ground, and I'd like to bring him into the PCI community so that he can bring the biodiversity issues in. With the work with IEEE on ESG, it also includes climate change. And so we are moving beyond. We were originally called people-centered because the internet just seemed to ignore the fact that there were people, and we wanted to make sure that that was front and center. But point taken, Mark.
Yeah, and I would agree that, that the, even in the design thinking world that normally starts, with people is, having a world-centric view is more of a large systems theory, right? Approach, right? That is beginning to get some traction. But, you still find in the organizations that do that kind of design that they talk about human-centered, right? And so there's some evolution taking place in terms of either being system-centered, Gaia-centered, Earth, or, systems. So it's good, Mark. It's good thinking, all right?
Thank you. I will just add one more thought. It was Yuval Noah Harari who opened my eyes. I was one of those people who was very human-centered and didn't think about this. And when he talks about what we did to the animals, for example, to get to where we are, it really started to get to me. So it opened my eyes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Santa Fe Institute stuff that was very human at the beginning, the complex adaptive systems theory stuff has started to take in so much more, right, territory. So it's
Thank
good.
you.
Gentlemen, may I just have a voice of contrariness?
Sure, Brian.
I do think the ultimate God created the human being, people. And regardless, and so I am particularly drawn to the name because of the emphasis in setting priorities correctly. It is so easy. I'm reminded of a Star Trek episode where the two planets were warring with each other by computers, and people would just walk into disintegrators, and they had peace because people would kill themselves. And Captain Kirk shows up and says, enough of that. People are going to be what it's all about. So that's my 2 cents.
Very good. Other questions?
I will say, Brian Donahue runs a Star Trek champagne and waffles killer breakfast. So he is the Star Trek guy.
So I don't see any other questions at the moment. Mei Lin, would you like to give us some concluding comments as we end our first call of the year?
I think 2022 is going to be a big year for PCI, and there are new things that are just emerging from sort of under the surface. Please reach out to me. Any of the 8 items that are listed in the annual roundup. We want your input. We need your feedback to make sure that we're not kind of stepping on things that we shouldn't be. We need your involvement and engagement. We want it because a few people can't do it all. And the more diverse participation will make sure that there are fewer unforeseen consequences. So thank you for who you are and what you do.
Thanks everyone for being with us. And with that, we'll conclude this call. And we'll look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Cheers. Thanks,
Bye.
Mei Lin.
Take
Thank you,
care.
Kevin.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.